Bueno, muchas gracias a todos por acompañarnos hoy. ¿Se escucha bien al fondo? ¿Se escucha? Vale, muchas gracias. Hablaremos indistintamente a un lado y otro, pero sobre todo nos dirigiremos a donde esté la mayor parte de vosotros. Es el primer acto que se celebra en Ivorypress desde el comienzo de la pandemia y es entonces para todos un motivo de felicidad el poder volver a estar aquí y vernos todos. Elena, muchas gracias otra vez siempre por acogernos para un acto que celebra el lanzamiento de un libro que es de la Fundación Norman Foster, pero con la colaboración de Ivorypress. Así que estamos aquí hablando de una realización conjunta que se acoge aquí, pero que se fundamenta en el trabajo de la propia Fundación, sobre todo, claro, con los dibujos de Norman y con el trabajo de Jorge Sainz, que durante mucho tiempo ha puesto en marcha con Elena este gran proyecto editorial. Solo deciros cuál va a ser la mecánica del funcionamiento hoy. En primer lugar va a hablar Norman en inglés, haciendo una presentación general. A continuación lo hará Jorge en español. Tendremos después un diálogo entre ambos, que voy a procurar moderar, y acabaremos a tiempo para dar la palabra a cualquiera que quiera intervenir. Procuraré veros a distancia y daros la palabra para hablar indistintamente, para preguntar indistintamente en español o en inglés, y confiando en acabar alrededor de las 9 menos cuarto. Así que esto es lo que va a ocurrir. En Ivorypress, en estas mismas salas, se celebró hace ya 12 años la primera exposición de los dibujos de Norman y es maravilloso regresar aquí 12 años después para ver el primer volumen de una gran aventura editorial. Así que... I will indeed. I will indeed. I was not aware, but Jorge is going to speak in Spanish, so anyway, we'll manage. Anyway, simply to remind everyone that this is the first public meeting in Ivorypress since the start of the pandemics, so it's a moment of great happiness for all of us. Second, the mechanics of the meeting is going to be the following. Norman is going to speak in English. Jorge, who is in charge of the edition of this collection of books with Norman sketchbooks, will do it in his turn, in Spanish and perhaps also in English, if we have a mixed audience. I will then conduct a conversation between them both. And finally, we will stop in time for any of you who want to fire questions to have the opportunity to do so, hoping to finish something like 8:45. So this is the mechanics. As I said before, in Ivorypress organized the first exhibition of Norman Foster drawings 12 years ago. So it's a kind of a return home to be here again to launch this ambitious editorial project. So with no more commentary, Norman, it's your turn.
Thank you, Louis. This is a celebration of coming together for the first time since the pandemic. It's a celebration of the book, of drawings, and like everything, it's Elena who makes it possible, who makes everything possible. And that is inseparable from the extraordinary teams who collaborated, the team from the Foundation and the team from Ivorypress. And wonderfully, it's a 25th anniversary of Ivorypress. So really, it's also, I'd like to pay tribute to Jorge for many qualities, scholarship, a discerning eye, patience, and an ability to do something that would be absolutely impossible for me. I'm really very honored that, that you've taken so much time and creativity in terms of selecting sketches, bringing them together, whether that's Volume 0, which looks at the a sampling from 1975 to 2020, or the more recent Volume 1, which is the occasion of tonight, which is 1975 to 1980. So thank you so much. And also to Luis, who's been a continuous, wonderful supporter in every way, and particularly for moderating tonight. So thank you all for coming this evening. Thank you.
Some years ago, in a window in a French shop, I saw a note that said, "We try to speak English." Yes, I try to speak English, and I'm trying to combine English with Spanish. I have to start saying that I am very honored that Norman Foster has allowed me to peer into his sketchbooks to make the selection for this book. Thank you very much. I have to repeat that the soul of this editorial project is Elena Foster, and she has been a constant encouragement for my work. Thank you, Elena. The idea of the commission in me, bueno, ahora voy a pasarme al español. La idea de hacerme el encargo a mí fue de Luis Fernández-Galiano. Sí, pero bueno, yo sé lo que digo. Entonces, Luis fue la primera persona que me dijo, en el archivo hay unos 1.200 cuadernos. Y sobreviví a esa primera impresión. La siguiente conversación fue con Elena y entonces ya lo tenía asumido. Y tengo que repetir también que en estos últimos 2 años ha sido, y ahora mismo está siendo, y estoy seguro que en el futuro va a ser un verdadero placer trabajar con la gente de Ivorypress y de la Norman Foster Foundation. Así que, many thanks to all of you. Muchas gracias a todos. Mi intención era hablar un poco de los libros, ¿no? Como esa tradición de este país que alguien dijo, yo vengo aquí a hablar de mis libros, de nuestros libros. And combining English and Spanish, the initial volume, the volume 0, that is almost sold out, covers the entire collection, as Norman has said, from the initial, the first archived sketchbook is 1975, to the last sketchbook that arrived when I was working, that is 1191 in that moment. Decidimos conjuntamente que lo mejor sería que la imagen del libro se pareciese lo más posible a los propios cuadernos. Y por eso la mayor parte de los dibujos están reproducidos casi a tamaño natural, salvo unas excepciones que son secuencias interesantísimas de cómo Norman Foster piensa dibujando, que se han reducido para ponerlas todas juntas. La mayor parte de los dibujos, por supuesto, son parte de procesos de diseño, design processes. Y esto a veces queda muy evidente. En algunos de ellos hay uno que me gusta especialmente, and Norman knows it, that is a drawing about a Hammersmith project and has a written appraisal, puny, weak. So there was someone that criticized that solution. That means that the sketchbook are not only personal work, but it's a work to interchange with the colleagues in the design process. Bueno, hay de todo en los dibujos, porque evidentemente, como pone el texto del libro, Norman es un dibujante nato, desde el principio. Así que hay croquis muy rápidos, esquemas analíticos, líneas reguladoras, plantas, alzados, secciones, perspectivas, axonometrías. Hay de todo. Es un libro magnífico para dar un curso de dibujo de arquitectura. Solo se podría dar el curso utilizando únicamente el libro. Pero hay cosas marginales, lateral subjects. Y hay muchos storyboards, guiones visuales para hacer presentaciones o conferencias. Y hay libros, diseño de libros, y hay exposiciones, y hay written reflections about Norman's philosophy of design. Even live drawings of admired buildings, dibujos del natural de algunos edificios que le han interesado. De Madrid, el edificio Castelar, de Rafael de la Hoz. Aparte de la arquitectura, hay también diseño. No tengo que descubrirlo porque Norman disfruta mucho haciendo cosas de diseño, sobre todo de objetos. Así que además del famosísimo sistema Nomos para Tecno, pues hay, mejor que lo digo en inglés, chairs, armchairs, deck chairs, sofas, beds, many beds, a lot of beds, lamps. And also there are a lot of drawings about the comfort in lifestyle. Many objects designed or drawn by Norman that I think that is an obsession of make objects for the comfort of life. For example, eyeglasses, wristwatches, bags, luggage, tableware, cutlery, and vehicles. A lot of vehicles, all kinds of vehicles, bicycles, cars, bulldozers, tanks, even drones. And afterwards, we have also the personal life, because the sketchbooks are not only professional books, but also personal books. And here we can find relaxing scenes, table talks, meals, menus, maps of holiday trails, excursions, and finally, lots and lots of humor. Lots of humor. So I am very pleased because I enjoyed a lot to make this volume 0. Bueno, pero estamos aquí para anunciar el volumen 1, que es la gran novedad. Entonces, el volumen 0, como abarcaba todos los cuadernos que estaban archivados, pues es un recorrido cronológico, poniendo pues un poco de todo. Pero el siguiente plan que vamos a contar es que hemos pensado, bueno, proyecto evidentemente de Elena, hacer un plan, lo voy a hacer en inglés porque a algunos les sonará, the plan 10. Es casi como el Team 10, pero en plan. Y el plan 10 pues, es inicialmente hacer 10 libros que abarquen eso que abarcaba el volumen 0. Hemos hecho el primero, que ya ha salido, el segundo está en marcha, y saldrá lo antes posible. Entonces, el volumen 0 solo abarca 6 años, 1975, as Norman has said, to 1980. Y only 128 sketchbooks, only from 1,200. The dates, 1975 is the first archived sketchbook. It's not more than this. But 1980 is an important year because Foster Associates was selected finally as architects for Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank. Then we decided to make not a chronological structure, but a thematic structure. Of course, the architectural projects and the rest. In this volume 1, the projects are Sainsbury Centre, very well known, the Foster Residence that was not built, IBM, Hammersmith Centre, Whitney Development, the Joseph Shop, a concept design name called the Egg House, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, but only the first phase. And finally, Renault, the initial designs for Renault Distribution Center in England. And the rest. And the rest, we have selected some subjects that are recurring in the sketchbooks and classified in these parts: visual thinking, practice, organization, lectures and exhibitions, book design, furniture and objects, vehicles, a lot of vehicles. And finally, a kind of miscellanea that the English correct word could be hodgepodge. The aim is, from my point of view, is to offer through this sketchbook, o sea, ofrecer mediante estos sketchbooks, esos dibujos elegidos de los sketchbooks, a detailed image of Norman Foster, not only as an architect, no solo como arquitecto, sino también como una personalidad con muchísimas facetas, lo que en el dibujo de arquitectura aparece muchas veces como intentar dar la imagen de su forma mentis, de su mentalidad como persona, no solo como arquitecto. Entonces, para acabar, el plan 10 ha empezado con el 1 y en principio está planteado que sean volúmenes que cubran, que abarquen 5 años. Así que tenemos 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 y lo que venga. Nada más, muchas gracias.
After hearing Jorge, many are wondering what percentage of the sketchbooks are contained here in the book? 10%? 1%? 80%? No, it's important, you know, because you have, Norman said, I wouldn't be able to select what to publish and what not to publish, but you have taken the heavy burden of selecting what to publish. What percentage?
Has a calculator, 1,000 and 2,000.
More or less. No, I don't want an exact...
No, yes, I know, but I don't know. the volume 0 has more than 500 from 1,200 sketchbook. The volume 1 has even near 600. I'm not sure about the proportion. The proportion.
No, 600 from how many sketchbooks?
128.
No, this period.
The volume 1?
Yeah.
Yes, 120. No, 100.
So it's more or less 4 or 5 sketches per sketchbook?
Yes, 5,
So
6.
it's minute.
Yes.
So something I wanted to emphasize is that a very, very small percentage of what you have drawn is here. You think you have everything? No, you have only a very small part, no?
Sure.
And I suppose that the more interesting parts are not contained in the book. Is that so?
That's, no, I mean, I think the micro. Sorry? Yes. No, I think your mathematical kind of insights should make everyone aware of the extraordinary task that you've undertaken, because it just gives an idea that you've been through thousands of sketches in the end to make a small and very considered selection. And I think that also had the benefit of feedback from the first volume. You've classified the sketches in a very interesting way, in a very kind of analytical way. But I think it just gives an idea of the enormity of the task that you've performed.
No, indeed. No, I was simply, I wanted to emphasize that a minute quantity of drawings has been found their way into the book. For Jorge, this is important. It's important for you because we are homaging you and Elena. But for Jorge, it's the culmination of a scholarly career because it's the more important project he has undertaken. So it's extraordinary that this material will be the foundations of future biographies. No biographer of the future could cover your professional and personal itinerary without consulting the sketchbooks. So, are you aware of the historical...
I think for me it's a very humbling experience. I mean, I'm so deeply appreciative. I never, ever, how can I say, at the time that one makes a sketch in a book, it never ever occurs to you that eventually that might find its way into the public domain. It's a very private activity.
Yeah. No, I realize that often it is something that you use as a blackboard on which you work. But sometimes you also do drawings that want to communicate. You are not talking to yourself, you're talking to others. For instance, I suggested, and couldn't do it because of having such a large audience, we couldn't have a screen here, but I must recommend everyone to look at the 4-minute video in which you explain the 15 drawings you have made for the UN, you know, the Geneva drawings, which is extraordinary. So let me make this, of course we are promoting the book, but let's also promote this 4-minute video with your drawings in which you, besides talking to yourself, you talk to others. And you become the spokesman of an amazing, initiative on
Well, I mean, just a little background to that. I wrote an article fairly generally about the importance of cities in The Guardian. And then I was called by the United Nations, who said, would I introduce their very first ever forum of mayors? So they never engaged, ever. So I said yes, and that was so well received. They said, will you continue? Will you take on the official role? And so the foundation's been recognized as a center of excellence by the United Nations on more specialized aspects like affordable housing. So really, perhaps the contribution that hopefully I've made is to draw attention to the power of an image. What do I mean by that? Normally, mayors will come together for the forum and they'll give a speech. And the speech has probably been written for them. They read the speech. And it's almost predictable what they will be saying. So I suggested instead of that they show images before and after of significant changes to the cities so they can share. And so it forces them to resort to images. And then I suggested that the United Nations should, instead of relying on words in their reports, they should use visual diagrams. Of course, I never anticipated that they'd turn round to me and say, what a great idea, will you do it? So I then found myself having to create these sketches and drawings to communicate ideas about people coming together, sharing experiences, creating a network, and visually describing the importance of public space, of green nature, parks, affordable housing, a variety of affordable housing. So yes, it's...
it's an amazing video. This is why I'm recommending it. And it's about drawing. And I wanted to ask Jorge,
Sí, si puedo añadir una cosa a eso que
Yeah,
has preguntado
please.
antes,
But do it.
about the importance of the drawings for the history of your work. ¿No? Algo que pensamos, decidimos, dimos vueltas a la hora de pensar el primer volumen y la imagen que pudiese dar a la colección, era que tenía que estar concebido para los futuros investigadores, que fuese un instrumento de trabajo, que una vez que se publicase, si alguien estaba interesado en profundizar sobre algún proyecto en concreto, podía empezar por buscar en esos libros publicados y en caso de que quisiera buscar más dibujos, podía ir al archivo y seguir profundizando. It is conceived for future researchers. Esto va unido a una frase que dije en ese vídeo que grabamos en la entrevista, pero que me gusta mucho decir y que ha sido polémico en la publicación del primer libro, ¿no? Porque cuando muchos lo habéis visto y si no, ahora lo veréis, ¿no? Los libros están ellos solos en la página, con la página del libro y una referencia muy chiquitita que casi no se ve. Esto es deliberado. Y la frase que quería decir la dije en la entrevista y la repito. Los dibujos hablan por sí mismos. Drawings speak by themselves. Hay que dejar que quien los mire extraiga la información. Porque además, esa información puede ser distinta hoy, puede ser distinta cuando la dibujo Norman y puede ser distinta dentro de 20 años. Porque los sketchbooks, los sketches, se caracterizan por ser básicamente polisémicos. No tienen un significado unitario, único. When you draw a sketch, you are thinking something. When I am seeing your sketch, I see maybe another thing. And 10 years afterwards, somebody could see different things. This is the polysemic character of sketch.
Jorge, but I want to ask you, because you are aware of the historical importance of your of this editorial project, and aren't you paralyzed by panic when you decide this I'm not going to show? This is what, because in the end, you know, these choices, you are orienting the work of future scholars. As I said, no biographies of Norman are going to be written without taking into account this material that you have selected and.
Como he explicado, creo que me explico mejor en español, mi idea sería que quien vaya a investigar empiece por ahí, no que eso sea lo único que tenga que ver, pero que sí tenga un primer punto de apoyo. Por ejemplo, some of the sketches are already published in your monographs, in other books of your sketches. They are well known, but we have added some not so well known and complementary drawings. So I was thinking, if I were a researcher interested in a project of Norman Foster, I would welcome a first book that could orient me, drive me to the complex of his thinking.
Yeah, Jorge, but I don't want to interrupt, but when you say researchers, this book is not oriented only towards researchers.
Not.
But I think, can you explain why everyone in the audience should get a copy?
Yes. If you like drawings, if you like sketches, you must buy these books. Lo digo en español. Si os gusta el dibujo, pues deduzco que la mayor parte de los que estáis aquí tenéis que ver con la arquitectura. No creo que seáis todos biólogos. Entonces, es una tradición que seguramente se va perdiendo, que los arquitectos dibujaban muy bien. Luis dibuja muy bien. Norman, no tengo que explicarlo, está ahí. Yo no dibujo muy bien, por lo menos no tan bien. Pero a todos los que os interese el dibujo de arquitectura, viendo estos libros vais a disfrutar. O como decía una profesora mía cuando empecé la carrera, piénsalo bien, si no disfrutas dibujando, te vas a pasar la vida haciendo esto, así que a lo mejor deberías reconsiderarlo.
So, Norman,
Well, I spent time this morning at the College of Architects looking at an extraordinary exhibition, the drawings of Julio Cano Lasso. So I think it's important to say that for me, and I hope for so many others, one gets inspiration and pleasure from looking at drawings by any architect. And the ones this morning were just amazing. I mean, it was wonderful to be able to link the sketches by this architect going back to works starting in the 1950s of the city, and then the projects and how they related to the city. So I think that to be creative, you don't necessarily have to be able to draw. But on the other hand, I think it's a tremendous tool, and I find it very difficult to understand how new generations do not necessarily exercise that skill of drawing, because I think everybody has the talent to, in one way or another, to be able to draw. And I think that some of the most interesting sketches are those which have been dashed off very spontaneously, and they give a kind of insight very much into the individual, the creative process. And so that, as you were saying quite rightly, there are many different kinds of drawing sketches. Some are, part of a personal process of exploration, and others are very much about communicating ideas for research, for exploration, for quantification. So I wouldn't, I'm suspicious of the idea of dashing off a sketch and that becomes the basis of a design. I think it's, design is much more investigative. It's much more systematic. So, but the drawing process is for me, an inseparable part of that wider process.
It is interesting that often when you have a public presentation, you create a storyboard of what you are going to say. Somehow, like filmmakers, make a storyboard of what they want to shoot. Or do you remember, of course, Le Corbusier, who also wrote this kind of storyboards to persuade clients of what you were going to find. In some cases, some of your storyboards are extraordinary, and they are simply the sketch of a presentation.
Yes, I mean, the storyboarding, and I'm conscious that I feel very uncomfortable with my back to you, so excuse me. But in a way, the storyboard for a presentation is, for me, rather like a film script in terms of the order of images. But this evening reminds me of one occasion that I'd completely forgotten. And that was the competition for the Mediathek in Nîmes, which is a kind of cultural center of the arts, the performing arts, painting, sculpture, archives, children. And I remember the jury, and everybody pinned up their drawings. And everybody, and it's a rather interesting lineup of competitors. There was Jean Nouvel, there was Frank Gehry, a number of architects, many of us in the early part of our careers, and everybody talked to their drawings, except myself, and I had a very small team with me, and I ignored the drawings that were pinned up and instead pinned up a blank sheet of paper and then talked about the principles behind the scheme, that it was much more about the site, and I drew the site and so on. And afterwards I got called by a representative of the body of architects in Paris and invited over to lunch, and basically it was to find out more about that process. And so it was quite interesting. Sometimes being spontaneous and just literally drawing through a philosophy and approach to a design can be very effective. It's a very, very good discipline. I'm not the first to have done it. I'm aware of people in the past. This was something that, for example, I saw Luke Kahn doing when I was a student at Yale in the 1960s. And there are occasions when, as you quite rightly describe, Corbusier would do that. It's theatre as well as...
No, indeed, what Le Corbusier did was, as Jorge knows well, and of course you know too, is that he did the drawings and then he hung them, you know, like clothes on a line. So at the end of the lecture, you know, he had a line of drawings explaining his process of design. Then he could collect the drawings and produce a book.
Yes.
So each lecture would produce a book after collecting the drawings that had been hung, you know, on a line at the end of the lecture. But Jorge, I want to know, you have spoken of the historical importance of what you are doing. Will you write a biography of Norman now that you know him so well? Because you are entering into the more...
Me conformo con hacer 10 volúmenes como este. Estoy, bueno, es feo decirlo, pero estoy muy orgulloso del texto que publicamos en el volumen 0, porque creo que las ventajas del dibujo a mano, hand drawing, hacen que una persona capaz de dibujar solo con un lápiz y un papel tenga muchas ventajas sobre alguien que no sabe hacerlo, al menos en el mundo de la arquitectura. Y sobre todo porque esto es una tradición que han utilizado en toda la historia los arquitectos. Por eso aparecían en ese ensayo pues, Villard de Ancourt y Leonardo da Vinci, left-handed as Norman, y Le Corbusier, por supuesto. Lo que decía antes sobre el dibujo de arquitectura, sobre que tradicionalmente los arquitectos dibujaban bien y es una costumbre que ya no es tan habitual, me refería fundamentalmente al dibujo a mano, hand sketching.
I'm just reminded of that somebody once said, if you ask Norman a question, he'll draw you a sketch.
Exactly. You mentioned it in your small video about the UN drawings. Because the sketches and drawings can transmit analysis and thinking with such clarity, with such economic means, that I'm somehow dismayed as a teacher that drawing as a craft is disappearing from the schools of architecture. We have many young architects and students with us today, and can we stimulate them to draw? Sometimes in the School of Architecture, I start the course saying, nulla dia sine linea, not a day without a line. You know, draw every day, write every day, because in the end it's a question of practice. You may say, Norman is a gifted draftsman, but when you see his itinerary at the beginning, he was more dubious. He has created such excellence through continuous practice. No días en línea. Drawing every day. And I would like you to now to help the schools of architecture by stimulating teachers and students to always draw.
I think also it's important to acknowledge influences, I mean positive influences. If I think back to the time before I started in a school of architecture, I mean, a huge influence on me was the combination of sketching and writing, the combination of the word and the image by a very small group of individuals, Gordon Cullen, Kenneth Brown, Roundtree, who contributed to the Architectural Review in the 1950s, 1960s. And I was very pleasantly surprised recently to open a book about Paul Rudolph, and the introduction was talking about how this critic saw a connection between his work in the context of a town and those particular individuals. And again, the drawings of Rudolph are very particular. I mean, I spent many hours just drawing parallel ink lines, shading and shadows on these huge drawings for, I can't remember how much it was, $3 an hour, I think, at the time. And I recently gave an introductory talk for the students at Yale on the first day of term, and this gathering was in the basement of the Art and Architecture building by Paul Rudolph, and I opened by showing a drawing, a cross-section through the building, showing that room, and remarking that, you know, I had contributed to that drawing. I couldn't say exactly which part of the shadows, but it was the ability to be able to draw lines very close together, very, very quickly. So
Jorge,
jóvenes, younger. Norman ha dicho una cosa importantísima: hand sketching and hand writing. The drawing and the word.
And that is not at variance with the digital world. I think it's important to combine the analog and the digital. And I talk about how you seek to humanize the experience of an airport by making it an analog experience in a digital world where you relate to nature, to the changing seasons, to the views, where you humanize. So I don't see a conflict here, quite the reverse. I see ideally a convergence between those two worlds. And it worries me that, that there is a tendency for that digital world to supplant, to replace the analog world of the sketch, because essentially architecture and design is about humanity. The machine and the technology is a means to a social end. It's not an end in itself.
Norman, and you have mentioned Gordon Cullen, how influenced you. The fact that you often write captions with your beautiful calligraphy, which are crystal clear. You know, this effort of clarity you often find in architectural drawings that are, you know, muddled because it's the design is still muddled in their heads. But in your case, sometimes, you know, the captions show an analytical clarity that you express through the clarity of your handwriting, which is very rare. And I wanted you to comment on that. Why do you write so clearly? Because you are speaking not to yourself, but sometimes to others.
Yeah, sometimes it's absolutely spontaneous and it comes at a first shot. Other times, to get that message clearly is a process of distillation. So, I might attempt that, and it's at the third attempt that I actually get it right enough to feel that it does communicate to the wider team of which I'm a part.
Because I wanted to ask Jorge, I hope that many of the drawings are accompanied by words. So it's words and images? What is...
There are many sketches with words and many pages only with words. And that's because I have remarked your commentary about handwriting and hand drawing, because it's something that you make. ¿Sabéis lo que está haciendo Norman?
If you show your... No, simply these 2 pages. May I?
Sure. That's my script for what I said earlier.
This is also architectural drawing. And there are no images. It's only words. But words are placed in such a way...
Yeah, sure.
Words are placed in such a way that transmit, thinking. And this is clearly expressed without drawings. But this is also a drawing.
No, it's...
But then...
But then you also have this. We don't have a screen, so we have to use the real thing. And sometimes, Norman, let me show them the clarity of the handwriting. I'm absolutely fascinated by the clarity of Norman handwriting, which I think it shows, a quality of thinking, because drawing is not simply something that we do, as a kind of artistic endeavor. No, drawing is a way of exploration of reality, and I think that in the case of Norman, this is evident. But anyway, I think it's right the time for us to ask for questions from the audience. So if you could put up your hand, I'll be pleased to. So, Elena, do you want to break the ice? You must.
No, what I wanted to say is that Norman, when you were asking Jorge how many drawings did you see there, I think Norman produced every day around every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, because even talking with me or with the children or having lunch, it's drawing and telling us the things with drawing. So it's part of the way to relate with others. So in not only are the sketchbooks that Jorge is doing, I spend my life taking napkins,
menus.
And I wanted to keep it for our children, our family, or keep it in the foundation for future architects or researchers, in the way to conceptualize the world. That you see the world through your images.
I mean, yes, you remind me that some of the most beautiful drawings that I've witnessed are from very young children at primary school, where we bring them into the studio and introduce them to ideas and encourage them to communicate those ideas through drawings. And there's an extraordinary talent amongst very young children.
Well, I don't believe in talent. I believe looking at you in discipline.
Okay.
every day, and sometimes I see you producing drawings for your projects, and you want to throw away hundreds of them, and you are repeating and repeating. It's not that suddenly the Hong Kong Bank or the JP Morgan or the Apple or your museums or the British Museum show up. Is the result of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drawings. And some of them are in the sketches, some of them are...
And yes, and as Jorge observes, quite often I put a line through and say, this is awful.
I was thinking that this must be the sketchbook number 1,500. 500.
Anyway, more questions? Yes, please.
I brought a number of students with me, around 30, and I encourage them every day to draw everything they think. And my question to you would be, since you do your drawings and you pile them up in such a number that you cannot think where your drawing was, is there a way where you select those ideas, those images that you would like to stick to yourself because those are important to you?
No, not at all. I just spontaneously fill up a book. This just happens that this evening I filled the last 2 pages. So what will happen is that this will, I'll just leave it at the foundation, start another. And as I think I said, or perhaps I didn't make clear earlier, I then would leave it to Jorge to select what he thinks is worthy of extraction. I would find it absolutely impossible to say this is more important than that. And frankly, I wouldn't get any pleasure or inspiration from that because it's going backwards. That's a task for somebody else. And I would find it impossible to attach importance because for me they're very casual, they're throwaway.
We
Sorry.
have a question from your back, Norman. I'm sorry.
Sure.
We are.
I was wondering, from what I've understood, you kind of just express everything you think with your drawings. And my question is, do you think it's able for someone that has zero ability to draw to actually learn how to express themselves like that and to even make it clear for everybody else to also understand it?
I really... Okay. It's difficult to use this and look at you at the same time, so swivel-eyed. I really do believe that everybody has the ability to draw a line and to make that for them meaningful. There is then a very good chance that that becomes meaningful to others. And on the basis that you have to start somewhere, I think that, I would just encourage anybody and everybody to somehow break through the self-conscious move of drawing a line on a piece of paper. I think it's an important first step.
Thank you, Norman. Christina, you have worked with Norman. How do you communicate with him? Through drawing? Because you have worked together. How do you speak or do you draw?
Both, I think. And Norman, sometimes very spontaneously, that I remember the first time that we started thinking on a piece for his house, actually, and he was drawing at the time, you know, the spot there to me, and I feel so shy to respond to it, you know, because he was inviting me to participate. But no, I mean, I think there is many drawings, as Norman was saying, or you were also suggesting, are explanatory of ideas, and in that way you need them. I myself being an artist, I also another abstract way of drawing, which is introspective into other order of ideas. But with Norman and with the projects we have been involved, it was about writing to him, talking to him, and sometimes, of course, trying to show him what he did with drawings, what I wanted to do.
How will you comment on your dialogues with Cristina? Or through drawings or through words? Because, you know, when you are not talking to a client or to a student, but to an artist, how do you communicate? You have the experience of communicating with artists. You have done it with several, but one of them is here, Cristina. Let's benefit from the opportunity.
I think that because we both create, and if you genuinely believe through your every experience that the involvement of an artist in the architectural process and the end result is going to be better as a result of that, and there's absolutely no question that that's been the case with Cristina, whether it's a canopy at the foundation here in Madrid, or whether it's two very important public spaces in Bloomberg, for example, part of the London headquarters. And that process was a very interactive one. It was almost like kind of playing a game of ping pong, where some of the exchanges would be written, some of them would be sketches, some of them would be exchanged, some of them would be spontaneously sitting together over a drink or a coffee. So very much an interactive process. And that is, I mean, the end result is totally seamless. It's difficult to imagine those public spaces which are incredibly popular, and so you find lots of people crowding together around the ledges, the water, and those works, although we would talk about what those works were doing, it would never occur to anybody enjoying those works. For example, they wouldn't be thinking, I'm sitting on a ledge, which is part of a sculpture, which is making it comfortable for me. I'm avoiding the ugliness of a barrier which will stop a truck bomb, so there's no ugly kind of separation. I wouldn't be thinking there's a spectacle of the water bubbling, evaporating, appearing, gurgling, that's cooling the space, that it's working acoustically to muffle the background noise of the traffic. All of these things come together. They're about all of the senses. But that couldn't come about without an extraordinary sense of communication between us. And it would be difficult to imagine that without the power of an image or images along the way.
Oh, thank you so much. We have another question here. Can you stand up and yeah, for everyone to see you.
Okay, I wasn't expecting this, sorry. I'm a student from Bartlett. I'm studying Masters in Architectural Computation, and I'm very aware of your work, and I love to sketch as well. And I find myself in a little bit of a dilemma between future of computation and sketching. And I see that your work has been influential and you have an amazing transition from sketch to your computational team. And I was wondering, how do you feel about it? How do you translate from sketch towards the computational thing?
I really leave that to others. I confess with a degree of embarrassment to feel rather the same way as Frank Gehry, whose work is totally, utterly dependent on the three-dimensional modeling via a computer. And as he observes, I can't even switch the computer on. So in one sense, I mean, interestingly, on the way here tonight, I called Diego, one of a small team of architects in the foundation, and I said, can you find my iPad and can you put an underlay of this sketch that I did? In other words, I'm still working at the idea that I can harness the computer in terms of layers and to start to use a pencil. I've tried with my son to engage with the computer as a sketching tool. So I haven't given up hope of expanding my ability to sketch and move sketches. Interestingly, again, I absolutely take for granted that one part of the sketch process on many occasions is that I immediately photograph it and send it out. So there is, in that sense, I never really thought about it, but I'm getting instant communication and sharing of some of these means of communication using the digital power of an iPhone. But on the basis that when asked what advice I would give a young graduate or student, I'd say, as I have said on one occasion, I'd give you the same advice I try to give myself, which is stay a student. So I think that in that sense, we're all still learning.
Thank you, Norman. One more question, please.
Yes, I have one question. It's about innovation and sketching. All sketches are not, for sure, are not similar. So I want to know if you have like aha moments that you are more expert and you feel that innovation is coming through the sketching.
I think that innovation is bringing together many things which have already been invented, but bringing them together in a way that they have not been combined before. So what I would describe as, say, the reinvention of the airport terminal, which was Stansted, which was a model that we subsequently developed and others followed. So that's now become an established model. But all it did was, it combined the ability to service a space from below. In other words, to be able to take all the stuff that traditionally was on a roof, all the ductwork, and pull that out of sight in an undercroft. That had been done before. Then to create a roof light above a tree-like structure. Each of those had been done before to uplight, which was not new. But putting all those things together was new, although each was established. And the sketch process, where I was able to communicate, but only able to do that after probably quite a lot of brainstorming meetings with one individual called Lauren Butt, who was an environmental engineer, who was the first individual that we made a partner in the early days of the practice. So the first partner was not an architect, was an engineer. So a lot of those brainstorming meetings, which at some point enabled the sketch, which brought them all together and showed how, in effect, one was really turning a conventional model upside down, letting in daylight, humanizing that experience. So the sketch, in a way, brought it all together, but that sketch would not, in that case, would not be possible without an immersion. The same thing, interestingly, happened on the Reichstag. It was a sketch which brought together a number of elements individually. So each, many brainstorming sessions about the idea of using negative pressure from the wind blowing over a dome to create an area of low pressure which would pull air from below. Then the idea of perhaps a platform in the sky. Then how would you get there so that everybody could get there, wheelchair and so on. So the idea of a ramp. But then if it was an enclosed building, it would be impossible because all the fire codes would kick in. So again, design sessions, an immersion in the issues, and then suddenly the sketch is the means that brings all those together in a way, and that sketch might be in the middle of one of those design sessions with a group of individuals from different backgrounds coming together, pooling knowledge, and the sketch might happen in that meeting as it did. So that's perhaps an example of innovation. It was the head of the Harvard Business School who said at one point, I would like to do a case study on the innovation of the Reichstag. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you put the populace on top of the politicians who are answerable to them. That's not been done before. That's an innovation. So yes, a long-winded response to say, you're absolutely right.
Thank you, Norman. Estamos aproximándonos al final de la sesión, pero quiero recordar que podéis preguntar en castellano si lo deseáis. Ahí detrás, podéis preguntar en español si queréis.
Hello, thank you for being here today.
No, también lo puedo hacer. No, como quieras.
Where does your creativity come from?
Sorry?
Where does your creativity come from?
I can't remember who said it, but whoever it was, the words were something like 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. So I think immersion, patience, stubbornness, immersion, and then based on that, when you are so saturated in all the issues around whatever it is you're creating, then, to use the words of Bob Colacello over there, it just happened. So.
¿Tenemos unas preguntas? Sí. Y aquí también. Todas desde detrás. Adelante.
Do you remember your first sketch ever?
Yes. Yes, I do. I can't remember how old I was, but I had to be really quite young. And I imagined myself in charge of an aircraft. And I remember sketching a stick-like figure that was myself in the only technology that I knew, which was a model aircraft which I'd been given. Somebody had made it. And typically it was a balsa frame with tissue paper covering the frame, doped with glue, with dope to stretch the tissue, and with a rubber motor, a wind-up motor. So that I have a very clear recollection. But way before I ever discovered architecture, I left school at 16 and I worked for 2 years in Manchester Town Hall before I was called up for 2 years military service. And in the town hall, I remember being reprimanded, being cautioned that I wasn't there to sketch, to draw, because I was in one of the departments of the treasurers, and I should have been doing financial work, and instead I was drawing. So it predates my discovery of art and architecture.
Algunos de esos dibujos los encontraréis si compráis el volumen 0.
Another question from the back.
I was wondering, what was when you're drawing? What's your experience? What are experiencing? Like, what are you thinking?
I'm transported to another world. I'm living the world of my imagination. So I'm taken momentarily out of the real world into the world of my imagination. And I suspect that's true of anybody who would respond to your question, that they're transported into the world of their imagination.
We still have one more question. We are finishing the debate, so please do.
Yes, hello. Well, I'm a student of architecture, and I would like to know that now that we're studying architecture, we need things to motivate us or to continue. So what did you find to motivate yourself in architecture that you didn't find in other aspects of your life?
I think that it was just an absolutely consuming passion. So, like now, I live, eat, and breathe. I can't separate any aspect of my life. I'm continually looking, I'm continually moved, inspired, or criticized, or despair by what I see around me, and the assignments that I'm fortunate enough to engage with. So, in that sense, I suppose it's a kind of lifeblood, and it's a love affair with the creative process of design. And And I remember saying, when I started studying architecture, that I would pay for the privilege of being able to do that. And in retrospect, that's exactly what I was doing.
You paid for it. Thank you so much, Norman and Jorge. Now we have the final statements in which you are going to discuss why this book is so good. And everybody has so final statements from Jorge and Norman.
Facilísimo. El volumen 0 está lleno de dibujos espectaculares. El volumen 1 está lleno de dibujos espectaculares. Los que disfrutéis con el dibujo, no os queda más remedio que comprar este libro para disfrutar varias horas y horas. No hay casi nada que leer.
Que hay una palabra todavía ahí detrás. Pues la verdad es que no os había visto, pero tomamos esa palabra y es la última ya. Por favor, ¿puede acercarse un poco? Porque es que quizá en la distancia no lo escuchemos bien.
Buenas tardes.
Muy bien, adelante, por favor.
Yo quisiera plantearle al señor Foster una cuestión. Yo no soy del gremio de la arquitectura, pertenezco al gremio de las bellas artes, soy profesor de dibujo de la Facultad de Salamanca. Pero he visto muchas anotaciones.
He teaches drawing in Salamanca, he's not an architect.
Jorge, efectivamente, el dibujo es un oficio, sobre todo una cosa que hay que emplear a diario, ¿no? En los alumnos siempre, no sé si lo planteo aquí, suelo empezar con una frase de alguien que no es ni arquitecto ni artista. Y dice, si no vas a dibujar, es que no lo entiendo.
If you cannot draw something, it means you don't understand it.
No sé si saben de quién es la. Pero explica, lo digo porque explica muy bien, lo resume muy bien, lo que es el alma del dibujo. Hay artistas que no se pueden, dicen que su obra solamente se puede explicar a través del dibujo. O Picasso, que decía que él era sus poderes. Me gustaría plantear al señor Foster, no conozco todavía ese libro, hasta qué punto podemos saber cómo piensa, quién es el señor Foster a través de esos cuadernos. Si realmente el dibujo para él es esa herramienta, esa forma de pensar con el lápiz, que es lo que decía Jorge, ¿no? Que eso nunca se va a poder hacer con un ordenador, que van a desaparecer dentro de no sé cuánto. Sin embargo, la sociedad no. ¿Cómo él esa herramienta de pensamiento?
You think with your pencil, and he wants to know if in the book he can find the real Norman, your own, the complete personality expressed in your drawings. Because he is not an artist or an architect. He teaches in a faculty of Beaux Arts in Salamanca, and wants to emphasize.
But teaches drawing.
He teaches drawing. He teaches drawing, and he thinks that if you cannot draw something, you can't understand.
I think you've done the most difficult thing for me. I think you effectively summed up the as somebody who teaches drawing, what you're suggesting has to be the reality. Yes, I could never have selected in a way that Jorge has, and so I would be probably trying to show something that would be closer to my ego or my vanity. I would be unlikely to choose the images that Jorge chooses, because some of them look really scruffy. Some of them are not the most beautiful or aesthetic. Some of them are quite revealing. And so, in some ways, I've made a conscious effort to accept that those are a mirror of an individual. They're also a mirror of a collective effort. I couldn't have drawn some of those sketches without the input from many other colleagues. Sometimes the people that I'm actually serving as an architect, I'm engaging with them as individuals, like Steve Jobs or Mike Bloomberg or Brian Roberts, and they don't have to be corporate projects. For example, Miguel, the director of the museum in Bilbao, is highly creative. I found myself doing sketches in a session with him on his project in Bilbao. Some of those sketches I couldn't do without his creative input. So yes, they are testimony to a lot of team working. I don't know whether that's helpful, but...
No, I think it is, Norman. I think we must sadly finish this conversation. Thank you, Jorge. Thank you for your long effort, for your presence today. Thank you, of course, Norman. Thank you, Elena. 25 years now, Ivorypress. It's amazing. And this is the first time we all meet here after the pandemics. Let's hope that we'll meet again soon. And thank you, all of you, for coming. And thank you, Ivorypress and the Norman Foster Foundation for creating this amazing volume. The bookshop is open.